Fresh from the showcase here at SwissWatchExpo, we've got some watches that are really great looking in gold and steel today. And they're actually related, even though they're completely different companies. On my left, I've got the Tudor Black Bay Chronograph, and on the right, I've got the Navitimer. And the Navitimer is in a red gold. The Tudor Chronograph is in also a red gold, but also steel. The Tudor on my left is related to the Breitling on my right, because the Breitling Navitimer on my right has the B01 manufacturer caliber movement from Breitling. So does the Tudor on my left. That's an interesting combination. One of the other things that happens within the Tudor lineup from Rolex, keep that in mind. Imagine Breitling and Rolex collaborating. The Superocean Heritage from Tudor uses the movement, the Superocean from Breitling uses the Tudor movement that is the three-hand movement, not the chronograph movement. So even though Tudor had an ETA chronograph movement for years, these are cousins, not necessarily brother and sister, two different companies. Now, a lot of people are taken by surprise by that, because when they look at the Tudor that's on my left, the chronograph, they think, wow, that watch is $7,000. Why is that? Well, keep in mind, when you buy a Breitling, if you have a manufacturer caliber movement in any of their series of watches, you're usually going to start out somewhere around $6,500 or $7,000 just to get the movement. So the movements are very expensive from Breitling. They're not kidding about that. But what's interesting is you would expect a steel and gold model like this one from Tudor to be a whole lot more expensive with the Breitling caliber B01 movement. It's actually the MT series watch. If you look at they say a manufacturer MT series caliber, the designation for the Tudor. So when you see those numbers, they won't represent the same as they do on the Navitimer. Why are we comparing these two other than the movement? Well, if you look at the watches, they're kind of similar. They evoke sort of the same feeling. It's that black and gold, red gold combination of look, the yellow gold combination of look. It's not something that I normally would personally wear, but these are two of the classiest watches I think on the market. And they're the two watches that actually make me want to own either a steel and gold watch or a solid gold watch. Until I saw the Navitimer like this one here, I was not interested in owning a gold watch at all. The thing about this watch is that when you put it on your wrist, all of a sudden it amps up the class. You start getting this feeling of, wow, this watch is really significant. And even though it's a solid gold piece, maybe you think, gee, solid gold is too flashy for me. Not in the Breitling. It really looks amazing. So I'm going to actually just put this on my wrist because I want you to see, even in a casual setting like me, the watch looks phenomenal. You cannot, in my opinion, buy a watch for the type of money that you're paying for the Breitling and get the solid gold feature anywhere that's as good as this. Now, one thing that you should be clear of, I always say Navitimers are hydrophobic. They're scared to death of water. They do not need to be submerged in water, because if you do, you'll immediately drown them. They're splash resistant. You can wear them. You can wash your hands. You can do that type of thing with them. But if you ever submerge these watches, there's going to be a problem. Now, why is that? The bezel on the top of the Navitimer is very, very different from every other watch in the marketplace. The crystal is actually a part of the bezel itself. So when you turn this bezel to the left or to the right, it's a bidirectional bezel. When you turn that and the slide rule calculates, because that's what that is on the outside edge of the watch, the gasket between the bezel and the watch itself is what's helping that bezel move along. So the watertight features of this, after a while, you do need to replace those gaskets. That's something you should always pay attention to on Navitimers. We do that here at SwissWatchExpo. The fun thing about buying from us is that the watch is fully serviced. It's completely oiled with all new synthetic lubricants, completely authenticated inside and out. But most importantly, all those gaskets and things are checked. And it is water resistant to 3 meters, allegedly. And all of the gaskets are tested to that depth before they leave the store. So perfect for everyday use, fine if it gets splashed by water, fine if you're washing your hands, not okay to submerge. Now, I mention all that because if you have a Navitimer in your collection, or and you want to add something that is water resistant, but maybe you want to keep that Breitling movement and go to a different model, the Tudor is the choice. So you use that same movement from the Breitling Navitimer, rock solid, manufacturer caliber, tested and tested and tested. There's really no other chronograph in the industry that's as good, in my opinion, as the Breitling B01. The Tudor has that movement. So you can get this watch and swim in it. You can get this watch and play tennis in it. You can do all kinds of things. This watch is absolutely durable. It's one of my things that I really rave about with Tudor, because the quality of a Tudor watch, beyond even Rolex, is extreme. They put their watches through a lot of different tests. One of the tests is a cold test where they shock the crystal, they shock the watch, they get it really, really cold, and then shock it with heat, and then shock it with cold from heat. So they go both ways. They make sure that the crystal doesn't shatter, crack. They make sure that the seals don't shrink. They make sure that all of these things happen in extreme environments that you'll never put your watch through in a lifetime. If the watch fails, it gets rejected immediately. They don't even go back and fix that watch. They just can it. It just disappears from the manufacturer. So they don't do any sort of reevaluation. Oh, well, let's put some new gasket in, let's try it again. No, they just junk the whole watch and they start again and they just move on down the line. So Tudor has my heart in a lot of different ways because of the durability of it. And I'm pretty rough on watches, and I like a watch that I can wear absolutely every day. Now, what's really cool about this particular Black Bay, and this is a Black Bay chronograph, is the color combination. That, I think I said red gold earlier, this is actually a yellow gold. It's like a bronzy color, but it mimics the red gold. And actually, when you hold them together, I don't know if we can see that in the camera, until you hold them side by side, they almost look identical. Well, that's because the way that Tudor makes this gold, it's brushed, it has a satin effect to it, but it also has a little bit of copper in it. So even though they say this is yellow gold, in my eyes, it doesn't really look like yellow gold. It looks more like a red gold. It's got an antique feel to it. Gold takes on an antique feel that gets a patina over time, and it starts turning a bronzy, orangey red. And that's how this chronograph appears to me, and that's how it appears to most people. So if you're a little bit confused by it, even as I get, you'll notice that. Now, it does have a solid gold bezel like the Daytona, the Rolex Daytona. It mimics the Daytona in a lot of ways with the pushers, the crown. It has dished subdials, and that's something that you don't see. It gives it that 3D effect, that layering. It gives it a lot of texture. Each one of the hour markers is raised, and each one of the hour markers has a golden ring around it to match the rest of the watch. It's not just painted on the dial, they're applied. It still has the snowflake hand like all the Black Bays. This watch also has the ability to have what's called a bund strap, meaning you can have a leather strap attached to the watch, but then there's a leather little pallet that goes right below the underneath of the watch. It slightly outlines it, and then it sort of supports the head of the watch so that the actual watch, the metal, doesn't touch your wrist. Now, there's two things that happen there. One, obviously, all Tudors are hypoallergenic. So in the past, in the old days, when the alloys, the metals, a lot of people couldn't wear the watches because they would break out, they would get a rash because of the allergens to nickel and some other things that are in some of the old alloys. That's not true of Tudor or Rolex anymore. But in order to evoke the sort of the look of the past, that bund strap would separate the metal from your wrist so that you could wear a metal watch without breaking out. Now, that wasn't necessarily all the reason. There was a lot of fashion involved in that too from the 60s and 70s. Kind of evoked a cool look. You'd see a lot of advertisement with people that rode motorcycles and stuff like that, wearing those bund straps. It was really popular through a lot of the rock stars and things like that wore the bund strap too. So it was a fashion thing in addition to everything else. But you can get that strap for this watch, not just the metal bracelet. This one happens to have the metal bracelet. So I really love this watch. I do want this as part of my collection. There are a lot of watches that I see that I love and like, and I'd like to have every one of them, quite frankly. But this one I'm 100% sure is going to make it into my collection one of these days, because the balance and the combination, the texture, the feel of this watch is spot on for me. It's not too heavy, but it does have a good weight to it. One other thing that I do want to show you before we end this segment, the bracelet. The bracelet has the capped in pieces. So the reason I'm holding this bracelet like this is because I don't know if the camera can see it, but there's just the slightest little edge here where you can see there's a plate attached to the side. Now, when I turn it this way, you might be able to see that it has rivets along the outside edge. Well, that's because that's how they used to make the bracelets in the old days. This one's mimicking that now. So you get this really vintage feel from this watch, and that's what I really like about it. From the sort of the bronzy red gold to the bracelet style, just everything about this watch evokes class to me. It is controversial. I recognize that a lot of people look at this watch and they kind of scratch their head and don't understand it. That's fine. I promise you, when you put this watch on your wrist, your whole entire idea of what this watch is changes. That's how I got hooked on this watch, as a matter of fact, because when I very first saw it in pictures, I didn't think much of it. I thought, wow, that's kind of boring. The very first time I put this watch on my wrist, everything changed, and I immediately said, this has got to be part of my collection one day. So between the Navitimer and the Tudor, these are two watches you should have in your collection. They complement each other. You can see that. Look at how closely they match. You can wear one to a beautiful evening out, and you can wear the other one straight to the ocean and still have your water resistance, even if you can't with your Navitimer. So I suppose you could fly to the beach in this one and then go to the beach in this one. SwissWatchExpo, call us, ring the bell, sign up, ask us questions. We'll be happy to help you along. These are two great watches. We've got a lot of Tudors and Breitlings in our inventory. We've got a lot of specialty Breitlings and Tudors in our inventory too. So give us a call. We'll be happy to talk to you about these watches and answer any other questions you may have.